Welcome. Welcome all. We're just going to get started in a moment as people are joining us. Lots of people already coming in. Welcome everyone. I'm just going to go to my Facebook because I know we're going to put this live on Facebook. All right, as soon as we go live, we promise we'll start. We're still bringing a bunch of people in. Welcome everybody. All right, great. Hi everybody on Facebook. Welcome. I'm just trying to get it on. Oh, there it is. All right, and now I'm turning the sound off so I don't hear myself, and I'm sharing onto my page and posting. All right, and if you all want to share this live broadcast on your Facebook page, you can just go to the Disability Voices United Facebook page and share it. Thanks everybody for joining us today. We're expecting a pretty large turnout because of the news of the week that DDS finally issued a directive that had been worked on, I know, for over 3 years, because I saw an early version of this. Do we have Rick on yet, Ed? No, I don't see him yet. Let me send him a quick text and just make sure he's available still to come on, because Rick Wood is going to join us. All right. Welcome everybody. I'm Judy Mark. I recognize some name. I recognize many of you, but there's a whole bunch of names on here that I do not recognize. So I will introduce myself. My name is Judy Mark. I'm the president of Disability Voices United and your host for most of these kinds of events. On the STP Connect, we meet here every other Wednesday. Used to be every Wednesday, but we have a lot of other stuff going on, so we have to do it every other Wednesday. I want to introduce the staff at DVU who are part of the self-determination team that we have. But the first, you all know Molly, so I'm instead going to introduce a new member of our staff who is joining us at DVU as a staff member as of February, but he's here to start. Tim Jin, you all know him. He spoke at a STP Connect in the last one of the year in December, and he is one of the founders of Disability Voices United, served on our board for a while, and now is coming on as a staff member as our assistant director of communication rights projects. And so we are really thrilled to have him. He is also a self-determination participant. He's basically been with us for a week. And so, but he has a lot. So it's anytime, Tim, you want to speak, just let me know, okay? Also want to introduce Molly Kennedy, our self-determination program fellow, who leads a lot of these sessions as well as Ed Herzl. You all know her. She is our communications and development coordinator, and she runs the show here. So we're going to get started because this is going to be quite a topic of conversation today. And let me just get my PowerPoint started. Slideshow. We will give you guys a chance. I should tell you, well, first of all, as you all know, we have interpretation in Spanish and Korean. So those of you who are English speakers, please go and pick English as your language, because that way, if someone asks a question in Korean or in Spanish, you will be able to hear the simultaneous interpretation in English, okay? And also want to let you know that you can ask questions in the chat. You can, Ed monitors the chat and saves all your questions and then ask them to me. You can also ask questions by raising your hand, by going to the reactions page, clicking on raise hand like I just did, and we will call on you, okay? I see Rick coming in. If you could make him a co-host, Ed, when you have a chance. Okay, So let's get started with our presentation. Slideshow, play from start. There we go. I'm sharing screen. And there we go. Molly, are you seeing just the slide and no like notes or anything?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So as you all heard, DDS issued a new directive last week. It is a something that we have been asking for a super long time, to just get some clarity from the department on what people in the self-determination program are allowed to spend their money on and what they're not allowed to spend their money on. I'm going to start by saying that the list of things that you can spend your own money on are pretty enormous. They're much broader than the traditional system. It's 26 pages that list all the services and define them. So some of what we're going to be talking, so we're not going to be talking about the full universe of things that you can spend your money on. Some of the things we're going to be talking about are narrow definitions of certain things, like related to your housing, related to your automobile, some things that are absolutely not allowed. And then everything else is pretty much on the table as long as it relates to your IPP. So let's get started. I'm realizing that I need to have another document available to show you guys. All right, I have other things that I want to share with you too. Okay. All right, so this was a directive that was issued on January 13th, so it's still very, very new. When DDS issues a directive, what that means is it's a guide. It basically is rules and instructions for regional centers, and they issued it to the executive directors of the regional centers in a letter. In that letter, it had 3 attachments, which they call Enclosure A, Enclosure B, and Enclosure C. At some point, she may have done it because I don't have the chat open, but if you could put in the link to find the directive on the DDS website, I believe it was in our email that we went out about this meeting today. Okay, so we will, so moving this forward, hold on, I'm trying to get the chat opened and the participant, I have so many things. Oh my God, we're about to get over 200 people. All right. So the directive is specifically about what they call goods and services. Goods and services, by the way, is a real government term. It's not the way normal people talk. And so when I'm not saying normal as opposed to people with disabilities, normal as opposed to government. Government is not normal people, okay? We are the normal people. The government is not the normal people. So goods basically means items that you purchase. So it might be an iPad to communicate. It might be a trampoline to jump on to get exercise. It might be a computer for a business that you have. So that's what goods are. It might be diapers. Services are those things that could be a person, a staff member to help you. It could be a class that you're taking. It could be therapy. So services are different because they're provided by people, as opposed to goods, which are actually items that you buy. So these are directions on the kinds of services and goods that you're allowed to purchase with the self-determination program. Oh, I went ahead of myself. Oops, sorry. So it's activities too. All right, see, I should have looked ahead. So it's the activities, the staff, the items you can pay for through the self-determination program, as I said. All right, so here are some highlights. So the requirement is that all of them must address an identified need or goal in the IPP. I have said this to everyone before because I have been reading various versions of this directive for 3 years. And so I knew that this is where DDS was going to come out. And these are the things that I advise people through the STP Connect for a long time. And that is that you have goals that you figure out through your person-centered plan, because that's where it all starts. Some of those goals are going to relate to your disability. Some of those goals are not, all right? Or some of the supports you need and services you need will relate to your disability, and some of them are not. So I'll give you an example. One of the goals that my son had in his very first person-centered plan many years ago was that he wanted to spend more time with his grandfather. That has nothing to do with his disability, but that is a very important goal to him. So that goal of spending more time with his grandfather did not end up in his IPP or his individual program plan, because the goals in the IPP should be related to the services and supports you need based on your disability. All right. So he had other goals, which is, someday to get a job. So employment might be something that you need supports as a person with a disability. And so that would end up as a goal in your IPP, which is really different than all of the goals. So remember that the PCP is about your hopes and dreams. That is the source of everything in your life that we all have. And then the IPP has very specific goals related to the supports that you need just because you have a developmental disability. So everything needs to meet an identified goal. So you can't put in there that that you want to, let's say, travel around the world, because that's not a goal necessarily related to your disability. But you could have a goal that says you want to learn skills to be able to travel someday. So it might mean that you want to be able to learn how to ride the public bus system, or you may want to learn the process of applying for a passport, or you may want to learn how to use a website that you can make a plane reservation on. So those are things that you need support as a person with a disability to be able to access the general community. All right. So that, though, I'm just trying to make it very clear that you have to have a goal in your IPP that has been identified for every single thing that is in your spending plan. I cannot emphasize this enough. All right. The directive also clarifies the role that the regional centers play. I know I have said this over and over again. People continue to make mistakes on this at the regional center level and individuals. Regional centers do not approve your spending plans. It may be that they're acting like they're saying we're not approving it, but they're acting like it, but that they are not approving it. The spending plan originates from the person who's received services from a regional center, and their person-centered plan. And the regional center has a role in reviewing that spending plan to ensure a range of things. Okay, they are looking at whether it is a service that can receive, or service or good that can receive federal funding. So remember, I told you there's 26 pages of services and lots of cool things you can do that can receive federal funding, that you can put in your spending plan. So they have to be able to identify some place in that list that meets it. Believe me, this is a very expensive list, very extensive list. Or they also look at whether the services can be funded by a generic resource. We've talked about generic resources before, but just to remind you, generic resources are those other places that you can get your services and supports funded, because the regional center always has to be the last agency that pays. They're called the payer of last resort. And so what are examples? By the way, this is the same thing in the traditional system. It's no different in self-determination than in the traditional system. So the examples of generic resources are the school district for school-age children, your insurance, either your private insurance or Medi-Cal. It could also be the Department of Rehabilitation for Employment, or IHSS, or in-home supportive services, for your one-on-one care. So you have to access those, okay? So, so I see somebody asking, and I'm going to point this out in a minute, that the regional center is not allowed to pay for things that other generic resources can pay for, but they are responsible, and it says it very specifically in the directive. They are responsible for helping you as a self-determination participant in accessing those generic resources, okay? They are, so let's say they say, oh, you have to use IHSS first, and you say, well, we were turned down by IHSS. They are supposed to help you access that IHSS, all right? Or they're supposed to show up to your IEP at your school district and help argue of why the school district should be providing you with these, with this service, all right? So don't let them just say no. They have to say no, but help you. So let's keep moving on. So here are some more highlights. All the goods and services, as we said, must address an identified need or goal in the IPP. Another piece of it is that there's a chart that lists some of the services that can or cannot be put in a spending plan where there have been questions about this in the past. Remember, this chart is not every single service. And I'm going to give you a heads up that amusement park passes are off the list. So I'm going to actually stop sharing right this second. And I'm going to share a different document that has that list for you. All right, so this is called Enclosure B. Enclosure B, okay? So, oh, actually, you know what? Before I do that, hold on, I'm going to stop sharing that. I'm going to do Enclosure A first. Let's start with A, all right? That way you can see the process. All right, so here we have Enclosure A. So it says, so this is the different steps that you're going to go through to develop your spending plan with the regional center. So step one is the good or service related to a participant's needs and their IPP goals. We have talked about that like 20 times here. Obviously, this is something that's very, very important. So one of the things they ask for is, what is the need and how does it relate to the IPP goal? How does the good or service help achieve that outcome? And does the good or service increase participation in the community? Because remember that all of our services and supports have to be given in the community. If it's not going to help them, so if the good or service is not related to an IPP goal, or it will not help them be in the community, it should not be included in the spending plan. So that's how come before you do anything, you must make sure that it relates to an IPP goal. Step number two, I really want to go over this part because before this was published, I had a very long discussion and a draft of this with DDS to say, this is really important that this is understood correctly. And so how I'm going to explain it to you is correct. Your regional center may say I'm wrong, and then they can go with DDS and find out that actually I was correct. So this is what DDS means in step number two. Is there a natural support or generic service that can be used? First, many of you have probably never heard the term natural support. It's actually an important part of the Lanterman Act. It exists in the Lanterman Act for the traditional system too. A natural support is a positive thing, everybody. It is those people who are in your life who are not being paid to be in your life. So there are people like parents, siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, and grandparents, your close family. There are people like friends, neighbors, coworkers, fellow students. So these are people who are in your life but are not being paid. Natural supports are more important than anything else you could have in your life, because people who are getting paid to be in your life are not going to always be able to help you. People who are paid to be in your life quit, they move on. You want natural supports to be there forever. So you all know Howard McBroom. I am a natural support for Howard McBroom. Howard and I have been friends for many years. I am not paid to be in his life. I am not a staff member. I am not his independent facilitator. I am a friend. Howard, you may have been part of it, where 2 weeks ago, he was expressing some concerns he was having with his FMS. So as a natural support, I offer to help him. These are the critical things in your life, everybody. You must have them. And if you don't have them, that's where you should be turning to your independent facilitator to help you increase your natural supports. So after all this explanation about natural supports, let me tell you how it relates to the self-determination program. So just like in the traditional system, you should explore whether there's a way to stretch your budget to save some of your money by having a natural support be available to help you. So the example that they use is an older sibling of a self-determination participant may be available to watch the participant while the parent is doing the grocery shopping, as opposed to having to use your self-determination funds. So if this is not possible, it may not be necessary. So if this is possible, it may not be necessary to use paid support, and the unpaid older sibling would be considered a natural support. This is really important because it helps you stretch your budget. Where I want to be very, very clear that what DDS means here is that this does not mean that you must go to natural supports first before you get to use it in your self-determination spending plan. This is how I've heard things are playing out in some regional centers, that some regional centers are saying, oh, you want your child to go to summer camp and you're putting that on your spending plan? Well, I'm a parent and I have to pay for my typical kid's camp, so you should have to too. No, that is not what natural supports means. A natural support is a person. A natural support is not an activity. It is not a thing that you buy. It is a person. And that is very clearly defined in the statute, in the Lanterman Act, that natural supports are people, okay? But what it also means is you're not, the regional center cannot say to you, well, the parent should be taking the child to that behavioral therapy and not a paid staff member, because the parent may be at work. The parent may not be available to be the natural support at that time. The reason why this is in this directive is because it's part of the Lanterman Act, and even self-determination participants have the same responsibility to try to use natural supports as much as possible, because, by the way, it's just a really good thing. It's a good thing to have a check and balance on those paid staff to make sure that there are unpaid people involved in their lives. All right. I'm happy to take more questions about natural supports when the time comes. But yes, go ahead, Molly.
I just want to add, for like adults who are living on their own and doing things, when like if you have a budget of transportation in your spending plan, and they say like, well, your family can drive you around, that's their job. That is not correct. As an adult, we get to choose what works best for us. And it doesn't have to be, just because your family's supportive, doesn't mean they have to be forced to do things.
Right.
So I wanted to make that clear.
Well said. And Tim Jin feels the same way, who lives on his own as you do, Molly, that he doesn't want his mom and dad to have to come over and help him if staff doesn't show up. So he's arranged for alternatives if there's an emergency as a backup. And I know he spoke about that in December. You can find his on our SDP Connect, on our self-determination interchange, you can find, or on our YouTube page, you can find a recording of Tim. I highly recommend it. All right, the second bullet here specifically talks about generic resources, as I said before. Explore if there are generic services that might help achieve that outcome. For example, is the individual eligible for in-home supportive services? And if so, do they receive personal care attendant services that can be used? So what that means is, just like in the traditional system, you must use generic resources if they're available to you before you can put it in your spending plan. But I want you to look at the last sentence, which is a huge victory, I think, for us, even though it's part of the Lanterman Act. The regional center should assist the individual in applying for generic services. This is really, really important that you understand this, that if the regional center is saying to you, oh, that can't be in your spending plan, you should get IHSS or the school district or whatever to pay for it, and you come back and say, they keep saying no to us, they will not give us this service, then the regional center either must allow you to put that in your spending plan, or they have to help you access that generic resource. That means showing up to your IPPs, helping you fill out applications for IHSS or for Medi-Cal, all of these things, all right? Okay, so step number 3, are the goods and services allowed under the self-determination program and Medicaid? So the self-determination program is part of a federal government Medicaid waiver. Okay, once again, this is government speak. So a waiver is basically an application that the state of California sends to our national government, to the American government, and says, could you help us pay for services that we provide to people with developmental disabilities? And in this waiver, in this application, it lists very specifically those 26 pages of services with definitions of all those services. And right here, it actually has the definition of those services in here. I know, Ed, you sent me a thing asking for the definition. So Ed probably put this Enclosure A in the chat. I haven't been monitoring the chat, but if she put that in there, in this Enclosure A, it has the link to the definitions of goods and services. All right, so there you have it. Some goods and services are not allowed. We're going to get to that in a second in Enclosure B. And some other goods and services are going to be provided outside of the self-determination budget. We'll also get that in a moment. There are also additional rules about this particular service code called participant-directed goods and services, which is kind of a catch-all of all the other things. And there's been a lot of questions by Regional Center on what qualifies under that service code. So we're going to go over this little chart that is way too complicated, but I'll try to explain it to you. All right, who can be paid to provide services? This, by the way, is in other directives, but this questions continue to arise. So who is qualified depends on the type of service. So for example, if you are putting nursing services in your spending plan, they have to have a degree and a license to provide that service if they're going to be providing behavioral therapy or something like that. But for respite workers, they do not have to be licensed or have an education. You should know that the financial management services is required to ask for the qualifications of any service provider where qualifications are required. And they have a previous directive that has a link to it to know which kinds of services need specific qualifications. They're pretty obvious ones. They're like nursing, occupational therapy, speech therapy, behavioral therapy, those kinds of things. Therapy, like psychotherapy is in there as well. Now, this is the one that people have a lot of questions about. So a legally responsible person cannot be paid to provide services. All right. So who are legally responsible persons? So it's defined by law, and it includes the parents, whether they're natural or adopted parents of minor children, okay, under 18 years old. So that means that parents of their children who are adults over 18 are allowed to be paid through the spending plan. It is not something that I honestly promote. I feel like there are very good circumstances where that happens and it's important to happen, but I think it can be overused. So I don't want to say I'm promoting that. Also, the legally assigned caretaker. So that may mean so it's legally assigned. So it's not like a babysitter because they're not legally assigned. It is more like a foster parent would be a good example of a legally assigned caretaker. Or relatives of minor children. It's interesting. I didn't notice they actually changed this right before, and I'm assuming that it's immediate relatives of minor children. I'm not sure if it goes so far as grandparents. I will try to get clarification. Of course, nothing ends up without questioning here. And then sometimes spouses. So I'm not sure why it says sometimes spouses. I'm going to try to get you all some clarification on those things. And if somebody here knows the answers to exactly what they mean by sometimes, I'm not sure. I'm sorry I didn't actually ask that question before this. Okay, step number 5, use of participant directed goods and services. We have a whole chart on that, so I'm going to skip this step 5. The spending plan development and review. So read this carefully, everybody. Participants develop their spending plan. Okay, not the regional center, not your independent facilitator. They may help, both the regional center and the independent facilitator and the FMS may assist you and support you in developing your spending plan, but it is your spending plan. It has to identify the cost of each good and service that will be purchased with the regional center funds. If the exact cost is not known, it may be estimated. So I'm hearing that some regional centers are saying, oh, no, we need an exact amount. You can't just put like $3,000 as an estimate. We need an absolute definite amount. You don't need that, okay? DDS says you don't. The spending plan must also identify the type of person providing each service. It does not need to include the name of the provider. So this has also been an issue at some regional centers where they've said, oh, no, you can't just put down gym membership. And then you're not sure exactly which gym you're going to join yet. And you've estimated the cost is going to be like $25 a month. You have time to go and search, and then maybe you'll find, okay, it's going to be Gold's Gym, and it's going to be, instead of $25 a month, it's going to be $20 a month. And now you'll be able to adjust your spending plan and take that extra funds and either not use it at all or put it into a different service. The total spending plan amount cannot exceed the total amount of the individual budget. You know that. That's pretty obvious. Once the spending plan has been completed, okay, so you complete it on your own, you present it to your regional center, and the regional center has an obligation to review it, not to approve it, but to review it for just these specific things. Excuse me. I do not have COVID. I'm just choking. They review it for compliance with state law, including that the goods and services are eligible in this waiver that they call it federal financial participation, and are not used to fund goods or services that are available through generic agencies. So you may notice that nowhere in here do you see natural supports. So nowhere does it say the regional center reviews to make sure you're using natural supports. It doesn't say that. The reason why natural supports is in there is because it's in the Land Treatment Act for everyone, and it's a really good way for you to stretch your budget. All right. The approved spending plan then is attached to the participant's IBP, and it is sent, they didn't have it in here, but it is sent to the FMS, and the FMS allows you to, and knows how to spend the funds. All right. And then you may have billing or whatever. You may have your service providers or the staff get in touch with the FMS and become part of the FMS network. Some of the FMSs are calling them vendors. I can't stand that term because vendors is a traditional regional center service term, but that's what they're calling it. All right, so that is Enclosure A. I'll stop sharing that, and then we will go to Enclosure B, which is very important as well. All right, so here is Enclosure B. So Enclosure B talks about some of the services and goods that people have been asking questions about on the self-determination program. This is not every single service. Once again, in this enclosure, the more comprehensive list of services can be found here, and you can click on that link. All right. So these are the things that have been questioned. So first of all, I actually think this chart is really well organized and very helpful to everybody. So for home and living expenses, what is allowed is that you are allowed to spend funds on transitioning. So let's say you're moving from a group home into an individual apartment. It can help you with your finding. You can hire someone to help you find a place to live, to help you fill out the application. And kind of helping with things related to landlord disputes, or even getting your housing recertified with Section 8, all those kinds of things. What is also allowed is adapting your home to your disability, just specifically to your disability. So it might mean putting in grab bars in your bathtub, or an automatic door opener, or a ramp, a wheelchair ramp heading into your home, or even widening a doorway of, let's say, a bathroom. It also could deal with safety issues, such as putting in an alarm system if there's a child, maybe there's a child who might get out at night, or even security cameras, these kinds of things that are related, not security for like people who might rob you. It is security for the person related to their disability. All right. What is not allowed? This is very clear that room and board is another terrible term that's like from the 1940s or something. Board means food. So that's rent, groceries, hotel stays cannot be purchased directly, or any kind of anything related to rent. All right, cannot be purchased with your self-determination spending plan. There is a little exception that I'm going to get to in a couple minutes. The next thing that's not allowed is adaptions or improvements to your home that are not related to your disability. So things like putting in a swimming pool, or making a kitchen remodel that's making your kitchen prettier, or kind of plumbing services, or just kind of general upkeeps of your house, like your dishwasher breaking, like that is not allowed. Now, if there are repairs that are required because of your disability, let's say you have like the ramp going into your home breaks, or the bar breaks, so some of that upkeep definitely is allowed. So I think that anything that is related to the person's disability can be repaired, but typical kind of general upkeep of the home, no. Okay. So the next section is about vehicles. So we've had a lot of questions about this as well. What is allowed is modifying and providing maintenance of those modifications for a person's disability. So it's like lifts or ramps or handbrakes. So you're making your automobile friendly to your disability. All right. What is not allowed is the purchase or the lease or the rental of a car. What is not allowed is general upgrades and improvements to a car that have nothing to do with the disability. They're using an example like new paint, or a regular upkeep of like changing the battery or oil changes. Those things are not allowed to be used. So you're getting the picture here, everybody. Things in your spending plan absolutely must be related to a person's disability. If you think about that all the time, then you will not have as many arguments with your regional center over this. All right. Community integration. So here's the big headline of the day. So what is allowed is a whole heck of a lot. Community integration supports is a service code in the self-determination program. And it includes so many things. And they give as examples, exercise classes in the park, swim classes at a public school, painting at a local art studio. They need to be inclusive programs on the whole, or continuing education classes at your local community colleges, or to improve your skills or get your GED. Peer mentoring, mobility services, meaning like learning how to ride public transportation, and friendship and relationship building. Like these are the examples that they provide. There are many, many, many more examples that exist, but they are all about maintaining what they call interdependence and independence, and to increase and improve your self-help, socialization, and communication. So a lot of things can fall under that, right? What is not allowed? So here's the headline. This is something that they are writing very specifically for our community. Goods and services that are purchased for entertainment, for pure entertainment. So purely recreational activities that do not meet the disability-related needs of the participant or their IPP goals and outcomes. For example, entrance tickets for amusement parks or similar for the consumer. Also, goods and services cannot be paid for, such as hobby supplies. I know we had a question a long time ago where somebody asked, I love to knit, so can it buy the knitting supplies? It cannot buy the knitting supplies. Or getting you a television or cable access or buying DVDs to play, okay? They specifically say that they are, and also concert tickets, they will not allow. Now, let me be very clear, even though it doesn't say it here, that they're very clear that they say entrance tickets for amusement park or similar for the consumer. So what does that mean? It means that the staff member who is supporting that individual to be able to participate in that entertainment, you can choose to pay for their admission. And the reason why DDS decided that that was necessary was because currently, if you are not in the self-determination program, those kinds of things are paid for paid staff. So for example, you may go to a day program and they may go to the local aquarium. The person served does not have to pay for the aquarium ticket for their staff member. It's usually the service provider who pays for that staff member. So if it's allowed in the traditional system, it should absolutely be allowed in the self-determination. Sure, I'll have a ton of questions about that. So then this is just some quick things that we've gone over in the past, but they're saying it again here in this directive. There are some things that self-determination participants can continue to receive that you don't have to pay for through your spending plan, but you can continue to receive them. And here are some examples. So some of you who usually are adults, but some of children as well, receive SSI. So in some cases, there's a pass-through service, meaning that there's a cash benefit that is paid to the person through the regional center, and that service, that SSI will continue to be paid, and you don't have to put it in your spending plan. There's two areas of employment. One is called competitive integrated employment, and the other is called a paid internship program. Those are state of California services. You can continue to receive those on top of your self-determination program spending plan, all right? Also, things like costs for your insurance co-payments, your deductibles, and your co-insurance, you will continue to receive that outside of the spending plan. And then this is the big one that just happened this year, was that rental assistance for those people who are not eligible for rental assistance through the government or are receiving rental assistance for their health and safety. can continue to receive that. So what is that? So that's a very small amount of people. They have a very specific code. You know who you are if you get that, because you're getting it in the traditional system. And what we were seeing is that those people who are getting that extra support for rental for health and safety reasons were not able to enter the self-determination program. Well, now you are, and you will continue to receive the rental assistance. All right, so let me go to the last one. This is taking a long time. I'm sorry, but it is. Let me, hold on, find the other, where is it? There it is. Okay, here is the final thing, final enclosure, enclosure C. Yes, it is very hard to read. I tried to simplify it for them, but okay. So this chart is only for one reason, everybody. It is just for you, for those services and goods that do not fit in any other category, any of those other service codes. And remember, I keep talking about these 26 pages of services. It's pretty hard to find services that don't fit into anything else. Okay, so here is how you decide whether it should get this service code 333. By the way, this is more of a training for the regional center, this part, than it is, and for independent facilitators. You as a participant or as a family member, you don't have to be worrying about what service code your services are. That's not your problem. That's really the regional center's problems. But I'm going to go through this for those regional center staff who are here. So first they say the IPP team needs to meet and discuss the goals. And if there is an identified goal, then you can continue forward. We know that. Will the good or service directly link to that goal? Yes. We're going to go with the yeses at this point, because no, then you have to find another funding source. Is the good or service included in another service definition? So let's say what you're looking at is an art class. Well, you know, that would be under community integration services. So it doesn't need it to be under service code 333. If you can't find the right definition in that 26 pages, you say, is there a generic resource available? Can it be paid for by the school district, by the IHSS? And if the answer is no, then you have to answer yes to one of these three questions, okay? Does the good or service promote interdependence and inclusion in the community? So it cannot be a segregated program. Or does the good or service decrease the need for other Medicaid services? So let's say other Medicaid services could include healthcare, right? So maybe it decreases the need for you to seek a doctor's help. All right, so maybe it improves your health. Does the good or service increase the person's safety in the home environment? That's pretty obvious. And if the answer is yes, then it qualifies under 333. I specifically asked DDS to give an example of what they mean by a code 333, and they did not give one in this directive. I have yet to come up with what that example is, but I'd love to hear if any of you out there have an example, because the 26 pages of services are so expansive that it's been hard for me to figure out what that might be. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. All right, so that is, wow, I've got like a headache from all those charts. So thank you. Thank you for the applause, Katerina. I appreciate that. So I know, I'm sure there's a million questions in the chat, Ed. So why don't we get started with some of those questions?
I would go so far as to say even 1,000,001. So let me, hold on one second. I'm just adding a couple to my list. And just a reminder, everybody, I do try to get to everyone, but if you ask multiple questions, the first one asked or the one that gets answered goes to the bottom of the list, just to try to be fair. So otherwise I go in chronological order. We had a question about that last time. So Laura Garcia asks, we would like homemaker services in the self-determination program. How would we note this in his IPP as related to our son's disability? He's 12. He has very high support needs that don't leave time to tend to home care needs. A disorganized home and clutter then adds to his stressors that are impacted by his disabilities. So it's a needed support. How would we phrase this as a goal in the IPP?
Excellent question. And you should know that homemakers are homemaking services are absolutely in the waiver in that list of 26 services. By the way, I'm just going to do a little promotion of our book, Think Outside the Box. We have the March 2021 edition. I think at some point we will be making a 2022 edition, but I know of 2 more directives that are coming out from DDS over the next month or 2, and we're going to probably wait until those happen before trying to update this. So the way I would do it, and by the way, I want to introduce Rick Wood, who's joined us, who is the chair of the statewide self-determination advisory committee and is our co-founder of DVU. So Rick, Molly, Tim, chime in for all of these questions. But I think that the way I would make the case is to talk about the fact that it's for the individual's health and safety to have a homemaker. If this individual needs to make sure that there's no dust in the house, if this individual is not going to do that dusting on their own, if this individual has some executive functioning challenges and maybe is not getting their dishes washed, so they're reusing dishes, that's obviously a major health and safety issue. Some people have physical disabilities and are actually not able to do their own dishes and laundry. So of course, homemaking services are going to be in their plan. So, I always like to think of in that terms, but, you don't want to put it as, it's just like it's just something we want, like it would make our lives easier. That's not a goal related to their disability. All right. Does anybody else have any other ideas of how you could argue homemaking? You want to add?
Judy, you nailed it. It's really the health and safety issue. But what it sort of brings to my mind is something that I've said a lot about these things, and I'll make a general statement, and that is the way you argue it is going to impact whether or not it is deemed to be qualified. And creativity in having that discussion about how the service or support or good relates to the disability is really, really important. So you don't simply say or take a no for an answer without thinking through how it relates to the disability. And what I have seen is spending plans in which the advocacy is creative are more successful, and people have better outcomes and are more satisfied than those who don't. So that's a general statement, but it certainly applies to this, because the way the question was presented was, well, we want somebody to come clean our house. Well, that's not enough. You need to show why. Why is that? It's not enough to say, well, because we don't have time. It is to show that in the event that does not occur, it is going to impact the health and safety and welfare of the consumer.
Thank you, Rick. Go ahead, Ed. And then after the next question, we'll go to a couple of the hand raised.
Sure. My next question is from Bell M. The regional center doesn't approve the spending plan, but don't they approve the IPP goals, which is essentially approving the spending plan?
Okay, no, they don't approve the IPP goals either. The IPP goals are your IPP goals, and they are part of the IPP team that helps develop those IPP goals. We have to understand that an IPP team it's an equal access thing. So the IPP team is made up of the person with the disability. Sometimes they're designated representative like a parent, and made up of other people, like you may invite your circle of support to your IPP, as well as the regional center. That is who makes decisions. So your goals or your IPP are part of a discussion. So don't make your goals be so incredibly narrow, like I want to become a movie director. That could be one of your goals in your person-centered plan. But your goal in your IPP should be develop good work habits so that I can get a job. Something like that. It needs to be related to the person's disability. All right. All right, so let's go to BM. I'm not sure. You have your hand raised to go ahead.
Hi. I know you said that Regional Center does not approve the spending plan, but don't they have to approve the IPP goals, which in essence, in essence means that they also need to approve the spending plan, because if it doesn't get into the IPP, it doesn't get into the spending plan. So,
right.
and
So
my
I
understanding,
guess that was your question that was just asked. So that
Right.
I just explained that. So yes, they do not approve your IPP goals. They participate in developing the IPP goals with you. All right.
really, it
Yes.
seems my experience in this process was that my case manager was acting as if she needs to approve the IPP goals.
Right. So remember that the person-centered plan in the self-determination program is your start. That's your starting place. In some cases, your regional center is not even at your person-centered planning meeting. And then from those PCP goals, you pull out those pieces that relate to your disability or supports that you need that relate to your disability, and put them in your IPP. So, so as I gave an example, it's not that you want to become a movie director. It's that you want to be able to develop maybe writing skills or good work habits. All right. And those are the kinds of goals that are appropriate for an IPP.
And I still feel that it was kind of negotiation. Like, well, I'm not going to put that in. And it was the response from the case manager. I'm not going to put that in. And
Okay,
I kind of feel like I have to negotiate. I feel like I had to like keep negotiating with her. And then and some of the goals to make it in. And
so can you give me an example of a goal that they refused to put in?
I can't remember offhand because it was literally 8 months ago now, but I just remember that I have to be very careful what I was asking because I was transitioned out of obviously a regular IPP to a self-determination IPP. And my understanding is she's also new at it. So I guess I was the first family that was asking to be enrolled in that self-determination program. And she actually at one point said to me, well, I know what you're doing, because I was basically changing the wording of the goals so that I can make it into the spending plan, because I was approaching it as that she have to approve the IPP goals, and in order to, so that if she doesn't approve the IPP goals, I can't get into the spending plan. So I was approaching it as let's change the wording. I was adding to have certain things, certain goals change and keeping some of the existing goals, but changing the wording. And her comment was, I know what you're doing, as it was a negative. Because I told her up front that I want to get into the self-determination program.
Okay, so these, and Rick, join in. These are the things that you should be bringing to your self-determination local advisory committees. They need to know that these things are happening at your regional center, that you have a very specific goal, and your service coordinator is not allowing you to put that goal in, even though it relates to your disability, because they're accusing you. I know what you're doing. I mean, there needs to be some oversight of that.
Right.
So,
and I want to give her the benefit of the doubt, because she was at the beginning also learning it herself. So maybe that was the reason. But I do have so now I know, thank you so much for clarifying that she does not have to approve the IPP goals. Now, what I want to know now is, what if, for example, in terms of natural resources, or what was the other wording? What if
generic resources?
generic resources.
Mhm.
What if I have funding for example, speech through my local school district and through my insurance, but the money, basically funds, I know is not going to last through the end of the year,
Mhm.
you know, because obviously insurance company has a cap, or even certain providers, a lot of speech therapists in my area do not accept insurance. They
Right.
take, if you want a really good speech therapist, more than likely they will not accept insurance.
Right.
So
So Belle, so here's the thing. You have to try generic resources first. If generic resources limit the amount of services and you feel you need more, or if they turn you down, the regional center can either try to help you argue to get more services, or if they have to allow it. I see here, I'm saying it, that it has to be in your spending plan. So you need to maximize what's in your the generic resources. But if you feel that you need more than what generic resources is willing to pay for, then you should be able to put it in your
so
spending.
basically I cannot plan a year, basically 10 months in advance. I have to wait until the funding kind of almost depletes, then ask for emergency meeting to review.
No, I wouldn't do that. I mean, usually when you get services from paid for by a insurance or by a school district, they tell you how many hours you're going to get.
No,
So
I
need to
actually
figure that out in advance.
Well, to be clear, I don't get hours. I have a settlement. So this, if I,
Oh, I
so-
see. Yeah.
So what? in
Yeah, I
that
mean,
case-
this is complicated. I kind of need to move on to the next question, but you could potentially, it's not that you need to have an emergency IPP if you are wanting to do something different with your spending plan. You can just put in a change to your spending plan, and the regional center has to review that. And then the regional center could say, listen, you need to go to your generic resources. And that's when you say, we tried it, the money's been depleted.
Okay.
So that's
all
what
right.
I would do.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Another question from the chat.
Oh, I have so many, Judy. Okay, so our next one is from Caroline. What if something is included as a goal in the person-centered plan and the IPP, but in the IPP, the regional center says that parents need to pay?
Right. So that's why I was very clear about the definition of a natural support, everybody. A natural support is not the parents need to pay for something. It's not an activity or an item. A natural resource is a person. Look up I will, if at some point, if somebody else is answering a question, I will try to put the link in the chat of the, I don't know, is Nina here? If Nina's here, yes, she is. Nina, could you do me a favor? And Nina's our director of policy. If you just Google Land-Term and natural supports, you'll be able to see exactly the definition. And let's get that in the chat if you have a chance. Thank you. Okay, Carl.
Okay, can you actually hear me now, Judy?
I sure can hear you.
Great, it's so nice to see you
Good
again.
to see you too.
My teaching schedule has precluded me from joining you on a regular basis, but we're now on winter break. I have two very quick questions for you because you have so many things to deal with. First of all, I've been attempting to contact the ombudsperson for nearly a week now. No return calls to the 800 number and no responses to the email. And I notice you continue to mention contact the ombudsperson.
As we do.
So I don't know. Now, you know that my name is toxic. So I don't know if it's just specifically me.
Oh, they cannot be picking and choosing who they want to respond to at the ombudsperson's office.
Okay.
Okay, let me be clear to everyone. If you have a problem, and I should have been saying this from the beginning, if you have a problem, you should be contacting the ombudsperson. You should be flooding the ombudsperson's office with questions, concerns, complaints, or even good things that might have been happening, right? all related. You should be asking things related to the self-determination program. I heard last week a report on, they've been receiving a fair number of calls that have nothing to do with self-determination. So make sure it's about the self-determination program. But we want you to. I'm not promising you that they're going to solve your problem or even return your phone call. If we hear that people are not getting phone calls returned, we need to obviously address that with DDS and with the ombudsperson's office. You should know that Katie Hornberger is the temporary ombudsperson. They're in the process of hiring a permanent person right now. I'm not, they're supposed to have 5 staff, and I'm not sure if she has any staff besides herself. I'm not exactly sure what process she is at in hiring people. So there may be an issue of her being overwhelmed with the number of questions she's got. That's exactly where I want it to be. I want her to be overwhelmed with questions and concerns to show that there is definitely some problems that need to be addressed in the self-determination.
Well, I wanted to get that on your radar.
Okay,
And now,
thank you. Thank you, Carl.
Very quickly, the core of my son's program is doing his recycling. Believe it or not, he is supporting himself on bottles and cans. We are at a point now where he needs to get a small pickup truck. This sounds like a job to go to VR. Do you know if VR handles that kind of request?
So you're meaning the Department of Rehabilitation?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so you should always ask them. I'm always surprised, honestly, at when the Department of Rehabilitation says yes, and then surprised sometimes when they say no. So I believe you should always ask them if they're able to help in certain things. Like I heard just recently they bought a computer for somebody. Like, wow, that's fantastic. But then I also heard, no, they're not going to help this individual because they have too many quote unquote behaviors. So, it always surprises me what they're willing and able to do. So absolutely ask them.
Okay, if VR declines, is a truck for his recycling work something that would be allowable on a spending plan? No. Okay.
You cannot purchase a vehicle under any circumstances.
Okay.
Okay.
Then we go to other resources, GoFundMe, whatever.
Right.
God bless you for doing.
All right,
God
Carl, great to see you. You're not toxic around here. Don't worry about it. Okay, Sandra, and then we'll go back to the chat.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, so one of our favorite regional centers is not doing IPPs when people transition into the self-determination program. They are keeping them on the birthday. And
oh no.
Oh yeah.
No. We've already had that. That was a different regional center probably who was saying it originally back in July, and they were told no.
Oh no. I have clients going in right now at that regional center, and they have been told that we'll do an addendum. The addendum just says self-determination and then the POS for the FMS, and that's it. They are not paying any attention to the PCPs and the goals on the PCPs.
Okay.
So if they ever get audited, or somebody comes back and says, gee, you're paying for whatever, personal trainer, and you don't have a fitness
all right. I need to know all the regional centers that are doing this, because somebody else just put in the chat that it's happening across California. So if you want to send it to me privately, if you're afraid to be noticed on the public chat, you're welcome to send it to me in a private message. I need to know the names of all the regional centers that are doing this, and I will send an email tonight to DDS saying this.
Regional Center of Orange County.
Okay.
And I'm working with 12 of them. The other 11 are doing it. So.
Okay. I had heard that VMRC was doing it, but I feel like I'm not sure if they're still doing it. I don't know if there's anybody from Valley Mountain Regional Center here.
No, they absolutely do an IPP before someone transitions in. I have many clients there. Okay. And when we're at the budget meeting, they're scheduling the IPP to happen.
VMRC is good. Yay.
Yes.
They were the ones at the beginning. Okay,
no, they're my favorite regional. My number one favorite regional center to
fabulous. Okay, that's great. That's great. Okay, so we need to deal with RCOC again. Tim Jen. Tim Jen is the vice chair.
And then for any of you out there that are getting BS from your service coordinator, get a supervisor, get their supervisor, get whoever's on the self-determination, because none of the service coordinators know, they haven't been trained. And so instead of going back and forth with somebody who doesn't know, just get somebody else. Say, we need to have a meeting with your supervisor. We need to have a meeting with your self-determination. There's one person over self-determination, at least at every regional center, that should know, not always. But
Each regional center is about to receive a whole boatload of money to hire up to 3 staff to work on the self-determination program. They're called participant choice specialists. And so the interesting thing is that, a lot of the regional centers already have people in this role, or I know that my regional center, Westside Regional Center, they just hired a person to fulfill this role. So we're going to see sort of improvements happening, hopefully, on that front. The key thing is that we have to hold these participant choice specialists accountable. When we heard that there were going to be 60 positions in all around the state, we did not want them to be 60 more people putting up barriers. We wanted them to be 60 people breaking down barriers and moving people into the program. And that regional centers are going to be judged. There will be measures that they have to meet in order to move people into the program. So regional centers that are blocking people from moving in various ways, we really need to hold them accountable. Okay, let's move back to the chat.
Absolutely. So my next question is from Lourdes. Can the FMS, the Financial Management Service, enforce GPS and live time recording of services for respite provider? I'm not sure what that means, but I hope you do, Judy.
I don't have any. Rick, do you know what that question means? I don't.
No, I can speculate, but I don't really want to.
We'd rather know exactly what that is.
Yeah.
Well,
maybe if someone wants to try again and put it in the chat and make it a little more clear.
Yeah, Lourdes, if you can clarify, I can try and reinsert your question when we get a chance. So moving on to something several people have had questions about regarding whether or not conservators can be paid for services rendered. And if I may just read this real quickly, can you please clarify as well if a parent of an adult SDP participant can or cannot be paid to provide services if they're not a conservator? So kind of 2 questions in one.
So if they're not a conservator, 100% sure they can get paid to provide services. Not that I'm recommending it, but yes, they can. I'm almost positive that even if you're a conservator, you can also get paid to provide services. I specifically, as I was reviewing the proposed directive, I specifically said to DDS, you really need to clarify this and the directive. I guarantee it will come up, and there it is. It already came up in our first meeting about it. Do you remember, Rick, exactly what their reasoning, why they didn't put it in?
No, I don't remember. I remember that it was unresolved for guardians and conservators.
Okay.
So this is a great opportunity for some feedback to DDS, which we can provide, because that issue was discussed and unresolved, and they need to address it because it's going to impact. It's not going to be a rare occurrence.
Thank you. No, it's definitely not going to be a rare occurrence. There are 50,000 adults in the regional center system who are conserved, so will not be rare. Okay, let's go to Jan. Let me unmute you, Jan. Go ahead.
All right. Well, you were talking about the check-in, the GPS kind of thing. And I was told that Mainsail will be starting visitation check-in, that they're working on it. And I said, is that for all staffing, like including personal assistants? And they made it sound like it was.
What? Mainsail is, what are they
It's-
checking on?
There, it's called, for staff, when they come, they're supposed to check in on a visit. She called it visitation check-in.
Oh, electronic EVV, electronic visitor.
Yeah, so that's what they're
verification. Okay.
talking about.
Yes,
And
that
it's
is
not for
true.
respite. So it's not respite, but it's.
No,
I
no, no, it
thought-
has nothing to do with respite. It's all direct service providers who provide, including IHSS workers, are subject to a federal law that was put into place many years ago called electronic visitor verification. I think that's what it stands for. And so regional center services, traditional regional center services are required to have a GPS that reports where that staff member is providing that service, whether it's in the home or in the community. You should know that self-advocates around the country have been arguing against this. They feel it's an invasion of their privacy to know where they are at any given time. No, people without disabilities do not have to check in about where they are at any given time. And I totally agree with them on this. However, it is still, by the way, this is not a Republican thing. This was a Democratic thing. It was under the Obama administration that this went into effect. They're trying to root out waste, fraud, and abuse of our system. And, that people are billing for things when they're nowhere near the client. Go ahead, Molly. You probably are passionate about this too, huh?
Well, I heard that they started something new in January, that providers had to teach all their staff how to do this new system. The providers are really upset, but I think it's also very demanding to clients that, I don't have to check in with self-determination. They have to just go by my word. And so I think this is very demeaning and should be looked at some point.
Yeah, it's coming for all of us. I haven't heard yet it's coming for my son's program, but it is coming. And we're going to have to figure out how to make it work. Unfortunately, I know that in the traditional system, guys, I am seeing a whole bunch of direct messaging to me today. And I forgot to mention that I do not follow the chat in any specific way. The only person that I read direct messages from is usually Ed and sometimes Molly. So I don't direct message me. I will not respond to you. I'm so sorry. If you have a question that can be helpful to everybody, please put it in the chat generally. Okay, next question, Ed.
Yes, so I have a question in Spanish from Evelyn, and I have it in a Google Doc for Lorna to view, but I am also going to put it in the chat. I'm not sure which one she's using, so folks, please don't put anything in the chat until Lorna is done translating. And just a reminder, Judy, that you'll need to summarize the translation for
Thank
Helen,
you.
our Korean interpreter.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you for helping me. Okay. I do understand that question. Hold on, I just want to repeat it. Okay, so Evelyn is asking how many months of the FMS waiver are they giving at Regional Center of Orange County? They're only giving 2 months. How many months are they giving at other regional centers? So let me explain what Evelyn is talking about, because she's using the term waiver, but it is different than the waiver we've been talking about, which is that contract with the federal government. So during COVID, DDS issued during the COVID emergency, which by the way is still here, as probably many of you have had COVID already out there in the world, that they are allowing people in the self-determination program to take the monthly expenses of your FMS fee. So, it's something like $150 a month or something like that. And you're allowed to take that money and put that into your budget. The thing is that the directive about COVID that allows you to do that gets renewed every 1 to 2 months. So it puts regional centers in a very difficult situation where they can only approve services in the traditional system or this ability to use your FMS funds in self-determination program. They're only allowed to approve it a month or 2 at a time. It's very difficult. I am sympathetic to the regional centers on this. So this is an example of regional centers actually following what they're allowed to do. I also am sympathetic to DDS on this, everybody. We don't know how long this healthcare emergency is going to last. Nobody could have predicted that 2 years later we'd still be in it. And so they're really only sort of renewing these directives every 1 or 2 months. Okay. Nina, were you gonna, you should be a co-host, Nina. Let me make you a co-host. Oh, I can't. Can you make Nina co-host when you have time?
Already done.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Were you gonna comment on that, Nina?
Oh, no, I wasn't going to comment on that. I had just raised my hand to just make sure I put this section of the definition of natural supports in the chat. And I, because I'm in the middle, as Judy knows, in the middle of a crisis, I've been in and out of this, but I wanted to make sure that you've probably already raised this, but natural supports is also, yes, it's about people, but it's also voluntary. You can, somebody can't be required to provide a natural support. It has to be, it's voluntary on the part of the family member or friend or whoever. So it, don't let anybody tell you that like you must provide a natural support from amongst your family members. It's an entirely natural thing. But on what you were talking about continuing, that you have to keep renewing all the directives. Yeah, it's because essentially that's why, there was a proposal to do regs for participant directed services, like the authority for this is really tied to the issuance of the health orders. So while there's a state of emergency, that's why they keep doing this. You can't. I don't think they really have the choice to make it indefinite.
Right. Okay, Christina Canarella.
Thank you, Judy. Hi, I just have a quick question about if there's a self-determination participant who wants to do a paid internship program, and there's a company or an organization or business that wants to hire them. How is it working? I asked this question at Regional Center and they weren't sure. They're still trying to figure it out. I'm wondering if anybody has done this. Who would oversee that paid internship payment for that self-determination participant?
Judy, can I?
Yes, Molly is a good example because she's using the paid internship program and she's a self-determination participant. Go ahead, Molly.
Yeah, so the paid internship program cannot be part of your self-determination plan. It is a traditional service, so it can't be included, but you can be on self-determination and still have the internship plan. I mean, you have to find the internship to do it with, but you can be on self-determination and work for a great organization like DVU.
Molly works for DVU. Part of her salary is paid for by the paid internship program, everybody. So we walk the walk here at DVU. We just don't talk the talk. We also hire people with disabilities, both through the paid internship program and through grants that we receive. So that's great. Go ahead, Ed, for another, we have maybe time for another 2 or 3 questions.
I will. I am eager to provide. We have so many great questions here. I have an anonymous question that I want to bring to your attention, saying the regional center is saying if a service with a qualification, like a nurse or psychologist, is in the budget, the participant must hire a nurse or a psychologist in the spending plan. In other words, the participant cannot use those funds for something else in the spending plan. Is that accurate?
That is inaccurate. That is inaccurate. Remember that your individual budget is a dollar amount. There is no line between what you were getting in the traditional system to your spending plan. But remember that your IPP goals relate to the services and supports that you had in the traditional system. Your IPP goals should be based on your person-centered plan as well, but they're related to your disability. So if you're getting, let's say, behavioral therapy, you may not decide to use the funds in your spending plan for behavioral therapy. However, you need to have some behavioral goals in your IPP, or all that money for behavioral therapy is going to be pushed out of your budget. So let's say you get behavioral therapy, you get funding for maybe traditional ABA therapy. Let's say it's for $10,000 a year, even though we know it's probably much higher than that. And you have a behavioral goal that, let's say, you will remain calm in stressful situations, that you will learn to greet people, you will make a friend, something like that, some sort of behavioral type goals. When you go into your spending plan, you may decide ABA therapy wasn't working for me. It's not really helping me meet any of my goals. And that goal to remain calm in stressful situations, I am much better off taking a karate lesson. I am much better off doing meditation or equine therapy or swimming or massage or all of those kinds of things, okay? So you have to be able to say the reason why I'm doing acupuncture is because it helps my mental health and it keeps me calm, which meets one of the behavioral goals. So no, there is no direct line. Regional centers get this wrong every single day. We have to educate our community to understand that that is incorrect, but you have goals in your IPP that relate to the services and supports that come up with your budget, and you've got to relate everything in your spending plan to one of those goals. So horseback riding lessons cannot relate to the goal of I like horses. Like, I just want to hang around with animals. That is not a goal related to your disability, but it may be a goal that's related to increasing strength in your upper body. All right. Or helping you remain calm in stressful situations or something along those lines. So we're trying to help you make your case. But what I'm also stressing to you is don't misspend taxpayer dollars, everybody. Remember that every dollar that's in your individual budget is paid out of taxpayer dollars. We have to be responsible stewards of the self-determination program. We do not want you overusing it. We do not want you using it to put in swimming pools in your backyard. We want you to use it so that you as a person with a disability are able to access the community and meet the same kinds of goals that people could have who do not have disabilities, to be able to be included in your community, good citizens in your community, have friends, have meaningful relationships, all right? Okay, we have 1 minute left. We do not ever go over time, everybody, because we have a lot going on at DVU. I'm going to have to cut it off here, guys. I apologize for those of you with your hands raised and the many, many questions. We may need to come back in 2 weeks and finish all these questions up, Ed. So I would hold on to the questions from the chat. I would encourage all of you to come back 2 weeks from today. And may have to continue this discussion because this is very robust. I will try to get answers to some of the questions we haven't been able to get today, that, particularly around the conservator and a few other things, and try to get answers from you before then. Just want to mention, if you're not on our mailing list, please join our mailing list. We have a lot of exciting things going on this year as an organization. Want to also say in our last minute that if you are on a local advisory committee in your regional center that deals with self-determination, DVU has created a prototype that we're starting with Christina Canarella's regional center at North LA Regional Center. We're very excited about it. We're doing committee-centered planning for local advisory committees. It's kind of like and Richard Deere is here too. It's his committee as well. So we will help Molly and Tim will come in as our staff, and they will come in and help lead a planning process for your committee to figure out what your hopes and dreams are for the committee. And then we'll help get you your support needs to be able to reach those goals, whether it's organizations that will help you meet those goals, your staff, or activities that you want to do yourself. So I encourage you to reach out to Molly or to Tim at any time. It's molly@dbunited.org. If you are a local advisory committee that's interested in participating in our little prototype, we're really moving forward with this at North LA, and they will be our example because they're an awesome regional center that's been very, very embracing of the important need for the self-determination program. So thank you, everybody, for being with us today. We will see you on 2 weeks. We broke lots of records of participation today, so thank you all, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Nina. And most thank you, Ed. Bye, everybody.